A godlike leader, death and sacrifice, and the end of an era. We're not talking about Jonestown. This is Endgame. Avengers Endgame is the 2019 sequel to Captain Marvel. It was directed by Joe and Anthony Russo, or as they are more commonly known, the Russo brothers. You'll know them from previous smash hits LAX 2194, LAX, and Mother Lover. It was written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. These are the same guys who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Pain and Gain, and You Kill Me. The movie's based off of a ton of different comics written by Lee, Kirby, Ditko, and Starlin. So the premise of the film basically comes down to the fact that the Avengers failed their mission, which was to stop Thanos from wiping out half of the universe's life. Now the remaining members of the team are out for revenge and trying to put things back to the way they were before the infamous snap. So as you guys know, when I talk about movies, I talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and then I give you my score. This time, I definitely will be talking about some ugly. That being said, let's get to the good. I really love the fact that Infinity War ended in this huge spectacle and that this movie starts off in this really quiet, poignant moment. It's really classy, it's done with great restraint, and it has a massive emotional impact on the viewer. And that's the thing about Endgame. This whole movie is about feelings and family and connections and appreciating what you have. And that's definitely a message that I and the majority of viewers of the film can get behind. Something else that I can really get behind is, unlike pretty much every other MCU film, there are very, very real consequences in this film. There are some truly hardcore things that happen in this film that have a definite feel of finality. Again, something I haven't felt in pretty much any other Marvel movie except for maybe Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I love the fact that our heroes are not wearing plot armor this time. You don't know who's gonna live and who's gonna die. And as sad as that is, it's also pretty damn awesome. Now when it comes to this movie, to me it feels like more than a movie. Honestly, I haven't felt anything like this in theaters since I was a kid when I went to see Return of the Jedi with my father in 1983. That's right, 1983, 36 years ago. The fact that this is the biggest spectacle, the most meaningful thing that I've seen in theaters to me, like as a fan since Return of the Jedi when I was like 7 years old, is a pretty big damn deal. And honestly, I don't think there's gonna be anything like this again in my lifetime. And this really felt bigger than Return of the Jedi or the prequels or the new sequels or anything, and rightfully so. This is like an 11-year, 22-film build-up to this point. It's like when you read a series of comic books or novels and you become connected with those characters down to your core. You know, you grew up with them, you read about them, they were your friends, they comforted you in times of need, basically. And that's what these movies and the people in these movies have done for millions of people. And even though we've had 22 different movies and we've had all these new characters introduced, it was really nice to see these core 6 Avengers do their thing again. And it was even more interesting because they did it with such high stakes and in such interesting places under these really unique circumstances. There were a few things that really stood out for me in this movie, and that was seeing a lot of the stuff from the past and different angles and from different people's perspectives, and seeing a lot of basically really weird stuff happen with the characters. I won't be spoiling anything in this review, not one spoiler in this review, so I can't go into specifics, but there was a lot of cool stuff that different characters did that goes against their character, or, you know, something happens in the past or whatever that really stands out. And I think when you see this movie, if you haven't seen this movie already, you're really going to dig that. It's not your typical Marvel movie. It's just bonkers. It's super weird, and it's awesome because of that. And one of those perspectives that I really enjoyed, although it was bittersweet, was seeing the perspective of the heroes after they basically failed their mission and failed the universe. You see all these different heroes trying to cope with what happened in the aftermath of the snap. You know, they're all in different states of despair and anger and depression, and, you know, they look different physically. There's just all these things that have changed since Thanos did his thing. And these things don't feel tacked on. They feel real. They feel earned. You know what I mean? Like, we've been through this battle with these people for 10 years. It was all building up to Infinity War, and the fact that they failed, you feel that in this, and you feel the aftermath and you're bummed out right along with them. So as crappy as a feeling as that was, it's also pretty great. And that's because it gets you more emotionally invested in the outcome of this film. And I gotta tell you, this film is an exhausting emotional roller coaster that really takes you for a ride. And I dug that because it was an amazing experience to feel all these intense, raw emotions, a real feel of authenticity, of grief that all of these characters were feeling. Some of their reactions and their arguments were almost off-putting because they were so identifiable. It felt like an actual family fighting, and it made you think of, at least it made me think of, things that happened in my past and stuff that happened with my family and everything else when you think something's going good and you make a mistake and it affects everyone. Even though everybody in this movie has some type of superpower or extreme training or whatever, they really just show their human side for most of the film. And the way that they subverted the things that we know about these heroes, the way we feel about them, the way that they move, the way that they look, all these different facets of what we've come to know about each of these individual Avengers, they completely changed it. Sure, a lot of the characteristics that they've always had are still in place, but there's so many other things that have changed about their emotional and physical makeup. And it really feels like 3 different movies in one. You have this kind of sad drama at the beginning, it's this family tragedy. And then you have this great suspense-filled second act that feels more like a crime thriller. And then of course the third act is the big action film. And all 3 of these genres have these great touches of emotion and comedy. And a huge chunk of that is the performances. There are so many people who give award-worthy performances in this film. Will they get them? Probably not, because it's this big, huge comic book movie extravaganza. But some of them definitely do deserve a nomination for their work in this movie. Not to mention their work in all of the other movies combined. I mean, some of these guys and girls deserve awards for sure. There are a ton of little tiny touching moments that mean so much to the fans in this movie, whether it be somebody giving another person a certain look, or somebody sharing their food with another person. So you can tell that the writers definitely took a long time thinking about all of these little touches and taking into consideration all these idiosyncrasies of all these different characters' personalities and how they would mingle with one another. One of the things that surprised me, and it might slip by some people, is the fact that one of the heroes actually kind of admits that what Thanos did has helped the environment. It has made the Earth itself a better place. It's helped the ecosystem. Now, they don't come outright and say that, but they do say something to that effect. And that kind of echoes what Thanos was saying and what a lot of fans have said as well. Like I've said before, I love a good time jump, and this film has a pretty big time jump, a quite substantial one. I'm not going to say how much or what happens or why, but when this time jump happens and it shows the aftermath of the time jump, it's pretty shocking. You see so many changes with the team, with the world, most of them for the worst, some of them for the better, and one that's pretty damn endearing. Throughout the entirety of the movie and during the build-up to this final conclusion and in that final battle, you still feel like they could possibly lose this fight. And that's because they throw in all of these close calls, these really tense moments, these nail-biting moments. When I finished this movie, I actually had chewed 2 of my nails, if you could see them, down to the skin. I mean, it was nerve-wracking. But this movie wasn't a bunch of nail-biting action. As a matter of fact, most of the film is comprised of all those really cool moments that we loved in the other ones. In between the big fights of the other films, they always have these little moments of downtime and bonding and communication that everybody really liked. The ones that really started with the first Avengers, with Joss Whedon's script. Well, this movie has a ton of those, and it's really memorable for that. So it's pretty heavy on the heart, and it's pretty light with the fighting. There were a lot of great jokes in this movie. Some people were offended by them, but that's really their issue. They're the ones with the stick up their ass. A lot of other people, including myself, love the jokes and love the ongoing gags. They added much needed levity to this pretty heavy film. This is pretty much the most emotionally impactful film that I've seen in a long time. Now, a lot of that is because of the build-up and seeing all of these 22 other movies before it or whatever, but there are so many moments in here that are very happy and others that are very sad. I cried 7 times in this movie. 7 times I cried. A couple times it was, a few tears, and there were a couple times where I was just sobbing like a little girl. And I'm not afraid to admit that. I mean, if this movie can do that to me, then kudos to the writers, kudos to the directors, and to the actors for their performances. And of course, a huge shout out to all the writers and artists at Marvel, whom without them, this movie would have never been possible. These movies have been with us and have been part of us for 10 years, but the comics have been part of us for 30, 40, 50 years, depending on how old you are. And that's a big deal. This movie and Infinity War and so many of the other movies are filled with these fantastic moments that I remember reading in the comics that I thought would never be possible to be put on screen. And I'm not just talking about effects, I'm talking about performances and production and just everything in general. I'm really glad that these films exist. So that's what I thought was good about the movie. Now let's talk about the bad. As special as Endgame is, if you are not a Marvel fan, or if you have not seen any of the other movies, this is not going to be the thing for you. Going to see this movie as a non-Marvel fan or someone who hasn't seen these movies is basically like going to a birthday party where you know no one and you can't introduce yourself to anybody because the music is so loud. You can look around and see how much fun everyone's having, and that's pretty understandable. You see what's great about it, but you're still an outsider. You have all of these great inside jokes and moments from the past and things that are finally paid off that were built up in prior movies. They're like a warm blanket for us Marvel fans, but for newcomers or people who are not Marvel fans, they're going to alienate the hell out of you. The thing I thought about while I was watching the movie was, someone who goes to see this movie who isn't a Marvel fan or hasn't seen the previous movies, it reminded me of when I moved from Boston, Massachusetts, all the way down to a place called Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I got invited to one of my friend's churches, and this is like a Southern Baptist church. Everybody's jumping up and yelling and screaming and playing tambourine and running around the church, and it was just this huge thing. Like, there was so many people doing so many things, and they were so excited and happy, and I'm just looking around like, oh, this is great. What the hell is going on? That is going to be you, the non-Marvel fan, watching this movie. And while I did love a lot of the jokes and the ongoing humor throughout the movie, there are some pretty serious moments where they throw a joke in there and it doesn't feel like the right timing, and it kind of cuts the knees out of that drama, out of that serious moment. You're just like, man, I really wish they hadn't thrown that joke in there. And as I said, Marvel fans are going to love this movie, and the writers and the directors and all the people in the studio know that, and they use so many moments in this film to basically expertly exploit your feelings. But as exploitative as this movie is to fans, it's also acknowledging them and giving them what they want at the same time. So there's this really weird juxtaposition of the two. It's very much a cash cow, as evidenced by the $1.3 billion opening worldwide. But at the same time, it's a love letter to the fans. It's really weird. It's basically the equivalent of your favorite band's greatest hits album. It's a lot of the same stuff. Everything you've seen and heard before, with a few new songs thrown in there to give it a feeling of freshness, even though there's not that much in it that is fresh. I'm not even going to get into the time travel stuff. I'm a huge nerd. I love physics. I love all that stuff. I've seen every time travel movie that you can imagine. There are a few time travel movies that are pretty spot on with their rules and follow them. This one isn't one of those. It does reference a lot of the other time travel movies and make fun of them and kind of make fun of itself, which is great. But I think they do that because they know if they put a lot of attention on that and they try to make that part a serious thing, then it's going to get shredded by plot holes and everything else. I mean, it kind of already does, but people don't pay that much attention to it because they're just going along for the ride and enjoying how they're feeling and seeing what they're seeing, And there are a few other things that are convoluted about this film, aside from the time travel thing. There are some points that they make that are very unclear. At some points, there are different characters who something happens to them, whether they be injured or killed or whatever, and you're just like, oh, that's fine. They're going to get the stones and they'll make everything better. And I've talked to quite a few friends who saw the movie, and they also felt the same way about these certain moments and characters. They're like, oh, it's going to be fine because, they're going to get the stones, fingers crossed they get the stones and they can fix everything. And the reason that a lot of people are feeling that way and not really getting the impact of these decisions that are made and what happens to certain people is because, again, like I said, it's not explained very well. You don't know that it's as serious as it is. There are a lot of inconsistencies with the heroes and the bad guys themselves too. Some strengths that they had in the past feel a lot weaker in this movie, and some of the weaknesses that they had feel a lot stronger. So you've got some of these baddies who just feel like complete badasses this time, and really they shouldn't feel that way because they don't even have certain things in their possession. And the heroes feel a little bit weaker, and they should be stronger because they have certain things in their possession. It just feels kind of crisscrossed and out of place. And there was some pretty hardcore retcon action going on in this film in regards to things that were mentioned previously and actual moments that happened in previous films. They kind of changed things around to fit this film and its narrative, and that feels a little off. I would have really liked to have seen them touch on humanity a bit more, because they show the state of the world and it's pretty jacked up. But there's been some time that's passed, so why are things still like that? Is it because people are just so emotionally distraught? Or is it because they just don't have the manpower to fix certain things, or what? And wouldn't these things make them feel more depressed about the state of the world? But to be honest, Marvel movies haven't really concerned themselves about people, about humanity. All the movies basically have been about the heroes themselves and their stories and what's going on in their journey. So they don't really show the bystanders of the people, except for maybe as collateral damage or as plot progression things, you know? And there is this certain sequence that happens in the film. It's kind of the linchpin for the conflict with Thanos to reignite that fight or whatever. And it just felt a little tacked on, and it felt like they were trying to figure out, well, how do we make these things happen? Or how do we get Thanos back involved and alter the course of events? Because if they do this one thing, it means that this other thing doesn't have to happen, etc., etc. And at first, I'll be honest, I was a little agitated by it, but they don't dwell on it for too long, and they do resolve that part of the film fairly quickly, so it's not so bad. And my last bad point isn't really about the movie itself, it's about the MCU. You know, where the hell are they going to go after this? You know, this was such a huge event with basically, you know, all these characters and, you know, this build up for 10 years. Are they going to stick to the same formula that already feels played out outside of a few movies? Is it going to be another, 7 or 8 years of more character introductions? Will they make the movies a bit more fun and a bit more crazy, kind of like the comics are, as they did with, Guardians of the Galaxy and Ragnarok? Or do they keep doing the same stuff, like I said, and risk losing all of these hardcore Marvel fans? You have a lot of casual viewers, but that hardcore fan base that always goes to every movie and buys the DVDs and gets the comics and everything else because of these films are the ones they want on board, because they're consistent money getters. They're going to be the ones that keep coming back. But if they keep doing the same stuff, or they don't build up to something really big, they're going to lose them. And that includes myself. So that's it for the bad. Now let's get to the ugly. There are 3 things I want to touch on in this rant, right? The first is spoilers. A lot of people saw this movie, including really big websites like IGN and stuff, and they started posting spoilers immediately. I mean, they even made a hashtag for this movie, "Don't spoil the Endgame," and all of these assholes went on their social media, posted pictures and, comments and things like that, sometimes just to spoil it. There's a bunch of YouTubers who put up like a picture, and that wouldn't have spoiled it, but they have a certain headline that says, "Why did so-and-so do this?" or "Why did this person die?" or whatever. Like, dude, we know you saw the movie. Why do you have to be an asshole? Now, I'm hoping that these people really got downvoted and disliked and people unfriended them and all that stuff, because that's what they deserve, because they are shitty human beings. Yeah, that's pretty harsh, but it is what it is. Someone who gets joy out of ruining other people's fun? Douchebag. The second thing, and this is the biggest one for me out of the 3 points, is it's a PG-13 movie. Why am I going to a PG-13 movie and they actually mute out every single curse word or kind of raunchy joke? There's a part in the movie where one of the characters gets hit in the balls or whatever, and he says 2 or 3 different lines, and all of it was muted, so I didn't hear what the hell the punchline was. There's this really great rousing line that Captain America says in the beginning, and they mute that out too. They muted out so many things in this movie. Of course, any kind of kissing, any kind of hugging, any kind of like public display of affection, they cut that out too. And I'm getting so tired of it, dude. I'm 42 years old. Why am I paying $21 US or 75 reals for the basic theater to go and see something that is hacked up by censors? It's a PG-13 movie. There is nothing you need to edit in this film. These hacks, these editors at the ministry here in Qatar and in the GCC in general are horrible. They are at their job. They don't have standards. They cut things as they want them, as they see fit. And they ruin pretty much every movie that comes to the theaters. I thought PG-13 movies were safe here, right, from censorship, but I guess not. It's not just rated R movies anymore that they can ruin. They can even ruin PG-13 movies. So all of you censors who edit films and other people's art for a living, you get paid to destroy other people's art, not just here in Qatar, but in the GCC and India and all these other places around the world where I heard that they censored this film in one form or another. I hope you enjoy yourselves, because you are a piece of shit. I hope that the money that you get is worth ruining other people's joy. I hope your next birthday is a bad birthday. But enough about censorship. I want to touch on something else that has to do with this movie and Star Wars and Fox and everybody else that Disney has bought up in the past couple years. Disney is kind of destroying the film industry. As much as I love these movies and the Star Wars movies and all that kind of stuff, I have to admit that Disney is becoming this controlling monopoly that is ruining the film-going experience. Here's a good example, right? And this is just one, keep that in mind. All of these different theaters had Captain Marvel still, and they wanted to get rid of Captain Marvel so that they can put Avengers Endgame on more screens. And Disney said, no, no, no. If you want to have this movie, you need to make sure that you keep Captain Marvel in there too, because we want to make as much money as possible. And the theater owner said, look, if we have Captain Marvel still, and we don't have as many screens for Endgame, it's not gonna make as much money as you guys are wanting. And Disney said, we don't care, do what the fuck we say or you're not getting the movie. They have a chokehold on the industry, they have a chokehold on the theaters, and it sucks. Sure, they're making good films and they're giving people lasting memories and stuff, but there is a whole seedy undercurrent to this thing, and it's only gonna get worse and worse as they make more and more money. But that's it for the ugly, and that's all my thoughts on Avengers Endgame. So all that being said, and I know it's a lot, what is my score? Drum roll, please. 7 out of 10.